Can you ever truly be ready for the WWE title? There's always a critic somewhere, and while you must have supporters backstage the first time you win a championship, you've also got so many eyes on you that one misstep will see the vultures swoop in. Really, the best way to go about it is to win the thing, deal with the madness, and then hope you get a second attempt. It's usually then when everything calms down and you can actually get on with the job at hand. It's not all peaches and cream either. So many times we've seen performers handed this prize only for them to suffer greatly down the line because of it. All that because you did your job and what was asked of you. That seems really fair. I'm Simon from WhatCulture. Remember to subscribe, and this is 10 WWE champions who weren't ready for the belt. Number 10, Jinder Mahal. We start with my case in point. I feel sorry for Jinder Mahal. Picture the scene. You're at your job and the boss says to you that they're going to give you 67 promotions, even though you're near the bottom of the rung. Who would say no? The answer is nobody, because that would be mad. It's like Virgin Media entrepreneur Richard Branson once said, when offered an opportunity, say yes, and if you don't know what you're doing, just figure it out afterwards. Jinder tried to do this, but ultimately, everything was working against him. But in this position, because of WWE's apparent desire to crack the Indian market, Jinder actually went from opening match fall guy to WWE champ in the space of about 2 weeks. It was quite a turnaround, and that was the problem. With no long-term build and flicking him on like a light switch, fans refused to accept him as the man. He'd been showcased in a certain role for too long, and at no point was it even hinted that he'd win the big one. From there, it was lackluster feud after lackluster feud as the narrative fought the audience. By the time we had Mahal taking on Randy Orton in a Punjabi prison match, most saw the writing on the wall. Or they couldn't, because the stupid Punjabi prison got in the way. It wasn't working, and WWE doesn't suffer these situations lightly. It was taken off of him before long, and he tumbled down the card. Today, he doesn't even get on the show sometimes, and how crazy is that? He probably would have been better off not turning up to work. Number 9, Randy Orton. Randy Orton was always going to be WWE champion. If you were to draw a Vince McMahon-approved superstar, you'd get him or Triple H circa 2000. Either way, it was quite clear what the plan was, and that was the problem. The powers that be had already decided this was in his future, so rather than wait till it made sense, they crowned him at the first possible opportunity. Doing so set the Orton project back a few months too, and this is why. A solid member of Evolution, WWE teased dissension in the ranks as soon as Randy won the championship in a shock victory at SummerSlam 2004. Not only did he take it off Chris Benoit, but he was the youngest person in history to win the belt at the time. It was clear what was happening. The fallout with the Triple H-led group went into overdrive from here as the game wanted what was his back, which meant Randy had to turn face, and that's something nobody wanted. The reaction when he won it at the pay-per-view was sizable, but WWE hadn't done a good enough job selling Orton as a good guy, so nobody bought it. He was also booked as somewhat of a coward and a loser. Stone Cold this was not. It was clear it hadn't worked, and Orton dropped the title to Triple H faster than he should have done if this had been handled correctly. In hindsight, it was likely done to erase the fact Brock Lesnar was the youngest world champion in WWE up to this point, but given he had walked out of the company, he was no longer allowed to have such plaudits attached to his name. Orton would move past this and look at the career he's had, but there's no two ways about it. This young version wasn't ready for the position he was put in, which proves that hotshot angles are certainly not a trope of the modern day. Number 8, Shawn Michaels. A weird one this, because who's better than the Heartbreak Kid? A brilliant performer as soon as he arrived in the WWE, within a few years he had the character down too, meaning he had all the tools to be WWE champion. There's certain rumours that Vince McMahon had to be convinced of this by Pat Patterson and Bruce Pritchard, but whatever, we got there in the end and Michaels got his coronation. So what was the issue? Well, despite being able to tear it up as either a good guy or a bad guy, Shawn wasn't able to deal with the backstage responsibilities that come with being the top man, as he fell out with pretty much everybody. That affected backstage morale, and his reluctance to lose meant fans never got to see a super popular guy wipe that smirky grin off his face. And that sucked! Michael spent months winding the crowd up, and yet until WrestleMania 14, we never saw him get his ass kicked. Without that payoff, what's even the point? It made for an uncertain and chaotic year in 1997, and if it wasn't for the rattlesnake, who knows what would have happened? Ultimately, Michaels would become one of those talents who didn't really need a title, but still, this debut one didn't go as expected. Number 7, Bray Wyatt. The real issue with Bray Wyatt was how he was booked from almost day one. Despite telling us over and over again that he was a monster and the eater of worlds, every time he got in the ring he lost. It was impossible to believe anything he said because he never backed it up. WWE assumed his vocal delivery was enough to keep him interesting, but they were wrong. Without conviction, the character continued to wane. The real nail in the coffin for this too was becoming WWE Champion. The last bastion to try and save Wyatt, he walked out of the Elimination Chamber in 2017 with the title, and then lost it 2 months later at WrestleMania. To make it worse, the match against Randy Orton was not that good, and had some weird overhead projector bugs in the ring. It was like we tried to do everything wrong and succeeded. Bray just wasn't in the right place to hold the belt. Thankfully, he's back on TV at the moment, showing us his Firefly Funhouse, and if that can be translated to the ring, then there's every chance he gets another go and makes it click. It really is make or break, though. I don't think fans would accept another mishandling of Wyatt. There's only so many times you can believe this is the time we get it right. Number 6, The Big Show. Even if WWE had done everything right with The Big Show in 1999, it would have been tough. He was moved into a position to replace Stone Cold Steve Austin, and realistically, who could have done that? Even The Rock wouldn't be on fire till a bit later. It was like being punched in the face and then getting told off because you were in the way of the fist. As inferred though, he wasn't booked well. As opposed to some threatening giant, management weren't pleased with Paul White's performances after arriving in the company, so kept putting him in compromising positions. He was once called a 500-pound bag of monkey crap on Raw, and that doesn't do much for your image. So when he somehow won the title at Survivor Series 1999 in a match against Stone Cold and The Rock, it was met by confusion. This was meant to be a huge moment and he seemed pleased, but didn't fit with what we'd been seeing on television. Big Show hadn't been in the mix at all, and if he hadn't have been a massive guy, there's no way he would have been put in this position. It was summed up when soon after, Show was sent down to developmental to sort out some issues, and that's not really what happens after you've been WWE Champion. Number 5, Eddie Guerrero. Don't get me wrong, Eddie Guerrero was 100% ready to be WWE Champion. In fact, he'd been ready for years and simply had to bide his time before winning it at No Way Out 2004 against Brock Lesnar. What a moment that was too, eh? Brings tears to your eyes. Guerrero was also absolutely beloved by fans, even those who didn't get him at first. I'm not ashamed to say he wasn't my guy originally, but he was so damn good at what he did after a while you couldn't help it. Eddie was a lovable rogue that made you care, and that's what wrestling is all about. When it came to being the top guy, the problem came in how Guerrero viewed himself. A haunted individual, it's been well documented that Eddie put way too much pressure on his shoulders when he got given the green light, right down to that being the reason WWE took the title back off of him, struggling to cope. The worst part of the story is what happened later. Just as he was in a place where he was ready to take on the responsibility, tragedy stuck, and he left us far too soon. Still hurts today. Almost 14 years on. Number 4, Alberto Del Rio. Alberto Del Rio's run in the WWE wasn't the best. Why that is, I don't know, but every time he seemed to get going, it was derailed. It could be that when you gaze into the past, you can't ignore how angry he seems to have been post his WWE time. He laid into them at every single opportunity. Let's also not forget that he did play a part in ruining the Summer of Punk in 2011. And while that's not really his fault because he was just doing what he was told, it still counts. Fans weren't and aren't happy about it. Mostly, there was just an expectation of Del Rio hitting the highest of all highs, but it never happened. The character had legs, but eventually he was just coasting along, and breaking up his partnership with Ricardo Rodriguez was just stupid. And none of this is meant to say that Alberto was bad. He had some pretty good matches throughout, but by the time it was his turn to become WWE Champion, it just didn't fly. No real passion, and there was no real love. It all came apart when he was made to be a good guy after telling us for ages how rich and awesome he was, and the less said about Mex America, the better. Don't expect to see him return anytime soon. Number 3, Triple H. That sounds nuts these days, right? Triple H and WWE are basically one and the same nowadays. But that wasn't always the case. When he really blew up in 1999, most people realized he was no joke, but was he ready for the championship? A lot didn't think so, mostly because they'd seen him clowning around in DX for the past few years. The transition wasn't complete yet. Within that was the problem too. Trips went from goofy good guy to super badass within weeks and changed up almost everything about him. Served him well down the line, but the audience needed more time to accept it before he was thrown in there with the likes of Steve Austin and The Rock. Management disagreed, because in the late 90s, that's exactly what happened. Rumors were abound before SummerSlam 1999 that Austin felt the same way and refused to lose to Triple H at the show, hence why Mankind was drafted in to beat Stone Cold at the pay-per-view before he dropped the belt to the man with 3 H's the following night on Raw. The irony is, while most people were right that this was too soon, having the belt helped Triple H in the long run. With that in mind, it's a double-edged sword. He wasn't ready, but also used it in the future to ensure that he was. That's the brain. Don't forget that a couple of years later, he was absolutely the best wrestler in the entire industry, and that probably all started here. Number 2, Sheamus. WWE went all in with Sheamus very quickly. Winning the world title less than 6 months after debuting on the main roster, the idea was simple. Introduce someone new to the main event scene and freshen things up. Probably something we could do with today, to be honest. However, when the Irishman beat John Cena for the belt at TLC 2009, it was mostly met with shock and awe. Who was this guy and what was the company thinking? It didn't help that he'd done this when Cena had fallen through a table to lose. Not really a powerful win, but there was an opportunity to make something of this, and it never came to pass. Really, WWE focused too much on Sheamus' physicality and not enough on rounding him out as a character. He was just a tough ass kicker who now stood on top of the mountain. Frustratingly, he got all of that down the line as his confidence grew, and at that point he was ripe to become the guy. Giving it to him a decade ago was just too much too soon, and he also felt like the hand-picked office dude. That never works. Even so, I reckon when all is said and done, we're going to look back on Sheamus' career and actually be very impressed with what happened. Maybe he was a little bit before his time. Number 1, The Miz. I appreciated WWE giving The Miz a chance. A constant in the company for years, he was despised by the fan base, something that's incredibly hard to do in the modern day. This wasn't turn off the TV hate either. Everybody everywhere just wanted to see The Miz get his ass kicked. Whether that meant he should be champion was a different matter entirely. Way back in 2011, the trigger was pulled as Miz got his hands on the biggest prize in the game, and he even went on to headline WrestleMania 27 against John Cena. Before long, The Rock was involved as the guest host for the event, and all of a sudden Miz found himself as the third wheel. That's when everything went bad. If either man had given him something, it would have been fine, but they didn't. The clear focus was on Cena and Rock, with Miz kinda just being there. Even after he retained at the event, there was no great rush to shine the spotlight on him, and because of that, we fell into mid-guy with the title territory. Happened here, happened to Rey Mysterio, happened to Daniel Bryan, happened to CM Punk. Why we keep doing it, I don't know, but it never helps. As such, Miz just didn't have the momentum to feel like a headliner, and it wasn't even his fault. He was put in an unwinnable situation. I will say that today, he probably deserves another shot at it. I'd be down for that anyway. Know of any other champions that weren't ready for the WWE title? Make sure you let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like the video, share the video, and subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling. You just click those buttons. Then head over to WhatCulture.com and read yourself some articles, and follow WhatCulture on Twitter at WhatCulture WWE.